I'll call to order the special meeting of the Finance Committee to continuing the review of the 2017-18 budget. This is our second meeting. Today and by the way, it is in your, whatever these are, iPads. And today we're going to concentrate on answering questions that were brought up and the capital portion of the budget, I believe. So, Mr. Garrity, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joines, members of the City Council. We thought we'd start out today with a note, three things on the agenda: the overview of the capital plan, review of the community agencies, their requests and the recommendations, and then answers to questions from the council. Ms. Tony's going to begin with the capital plan.
Ms. Tony, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay. We will first review the capital plan, and the capital plan provides a capital appropriation schedule for fiscal years 2018 through 2023. So on your first slide, you'll see two graphs. They'll look really similar. The one on the right shows the 6-year total, and the one on the left shows what we've budgeted for current year, FY 2018. You'll notice on both graphs that the environmental health section is the largest area in our capital plan. In that includes funding for like landfills, water and sewer, treatment and collection, stormwater management, and those types of things, and utilities. That's why that's the largest areas. And quality transportation is the second largest area on the graph. That includes streets and sidewalks, bus replacements and maintenance, transit vehicle replacements, and things related to transit upgrades and infrastructure. The next page just shows pretty much a summary of what I just mentioned. The 6-year plan is a total of $404 million, environmental health being the largest area, water, sewer, solid waste disposal, and stormwater management represents 78% of the 6-year plan. The appropriation of $16.8 million over 6 years in the 2/3 general obligation bonds is for major maintenance of recreation, fire facilities, street resurfacing, and bridge repair. So the FY18 budget is a 2/3 year. We'll have one again in 2020 and then again in 2022. For the FY 2017-2018 budget is $96 million. A major portion of the proposed capital is for investments in water and sewer infrastructure. It falls under the Healthy Environment Strategic Focus Area. The proposed use of $5.29 million in 2/3 bonds is you already have voted on for major maintenance needs for recreation facilities, fire stations, bridge repair, sidewalk maintenance, street resurfacing, and general government renewal projects.
Any questions on that?
Okay, great. Okay, then we'll move straight into...
I would ask one, and if someone could give a little more detail on the water and sewer. I think it's the sewer portion of one of the major forks that we're working on, but of that $96 million, most of it is water and sewer. Can someone comment on the water and sewer projects? And I see
Ms. Driver's here.
Ms. Driver. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Come on up.
Yes, so $62 million, I think, is for what we consider water distribution and wastewater collection. And a big component of that is some capacity needs that we have in our sewer outfalls. So that is correct. There were several outfalls that were identified throughout our system that need to be upgraded because of capacity issues.
Why don't you tell us what an outfall is?
Okay. It is a large trunk line, a main that conveys sewer from industries, houses, to the plant. And when I say an outfall, it's our large line, so it's the big trunk lines.
How big is big?
We have them up to 66 inches,
okay.
So they can be extremely large.
Okay, thank you. Okay, continue, please. Oh, excuse me, Mr. McIntosh has a question.
I want to talk about street resurfacing.
Yes.
And since we're in a we're in a 2/3 year here, can we talk about how much we're going to spend this year on street maintenance? I mean, I get an awful lot of comments about the conditions of our streets, and I want to figure out if this is a catch-up year. I know when the bonds came out, we did a lot of catch-up. What are we going to be spending this year on roads specifically?
Okay, so $2.6 million for street resurfacing projects for FY 2018.
Okay, and then how does that compare to an average year?
Well, it's a 2/3 bond year, so it's a little higher than normal for FY 18. It'll be around that amount for 2020 and then again 2022. So projected for FY 2019 is $1.1 million.
Lee, could you put on your list to get us, because I've gotten several questions about street maintenance, historically what we've spent and what we're going to spend.
And we can, and show you the list, and there's always more in a 2/3 year, but some of it's POW bill and every year in operating fund, and there's the 2/3, but we'll bring that back from Monday.
Okay, thank you. Okay, community agencies.
Okay, for community agency funding recommendations. The first slide shows you all the community agencies funded in our general fund. And it ranges from Arts Council, National Black Theater Festival, River Run, down to YMCA and various requests. What you're seeing here is the first column is the FY 2017 adopted amount, so that's the current year what we funded agencies. The second column is what the agencies requested. The third column is the Community Agency Advisory Council score. And then the column beside that shows how the Community Agency Advisory Allocation Committee, voted. And then the recommendation of funding, and then the last column is the city manager's recommendation for funding.
So the last column is what's currently in the budget?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
The last column is the proposed amounts in the budget currently.
Okay. And there's 2 pages of them, right?
So that's the general fund.
That's the general fund, okay.
Mm-hmm. The next page shows you the agencies that requested funding that's funded through the Housing Finance Assistance Fund. And once again, same setup. Last column is the proposed amount, which pretty much holds the line for the same as the current year recommendation allocation. The third page shows you 3 different funds. The first section is the Home Improvement Partnerships Program called HOME. Habitat for Humanity and Housing Authority receive funding out of that category. The recommendation is the same as the current year. The next category is occupancy tax. That includes Old Salem, Piedmont Triad Film, Renota House, which is a new request, and then the National Black Theater Festival. It's listed here because that was a CAC recommendation, but it's funded through the general fund.
Okay, yeah, it's in the other category.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the last...
Excuse me,
oh.
Ms. Adams has a comment.
Just a question, and I guess, what I would like to see. All of these agencies that are getting money out of these different buckets, could we see a report that tells us, like, for instance, the Arts Council, what all of the buckets did they get money out of and how much? Mm-hmm. And what other areas are we giving these agencies money? When it comes to the sponsorships, to come and get money, when they give things and they ask us, outside of this, could you sponsor 5,000, 10,000? Because maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's in here like that, is it? Because that money is another bucket of money that's like miscellaneous, money. But I'd like to see that. I also see whether CAAC voted no on some of these, but yet we funded them. So my question is, how much weight does this CAAC vote have in relevance to who is getting funded? For instance, on some of the, let's say the SOAR projects, they have, the Josh Howard people had 0 votes, 8 no's. I don't understand. Hoops for Life, same thing. I know that these programs do unique things that are needed in the community, but my thing is, why are people, what is the reasoning behind it? They turn them down when we all know Successful Outcomes is one of those unique programs. If we're going to reach people through the mayor's poverty task force, this is one of the areas I thought that the council agreed to address. If I look back at, like I said, I see Liberty East redevelopment got turned down on both of theirs, but yet we're funding them. You know, somebody needs to explain this to me, because what's the rationale that a person, a group, or an agency would have no votes but they get funded, and then you have agencies where they said yes and they didn't get funded? I don't, city manager.
Councilman Adams, we'll bring you some information on it.
Thank you. And again, don't forget my report about the people that's getting
Gotcha.
extra money during the year, because the taxpayers need to know that. Because I know that these agencies have things all during the year, but are we also giving them more money that we're not showing on the front side? Because that money then could go to some of these agencies that are really doing the grunt work and not getting funded, or increase their funding, again, when it comes to the mayor's poverty task force. Okay.
So your question is twofold. Do any of these organizations get some money through different other pieces of the budget? Sponsorship or something? And secondly, if the city manager's recommendation is different than the tax, your reasoning there. And there's probably 5 or 6, I guess, in that category.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Thank you. By the way, I appreciate the way you've gotten it broken down between general fund and the TDA and some other things, community block grants. Oh, Mr. Mayor had a comment.
Just very brief, I just wanted to thank the manager for the recommendation on the Nolda House. This is a one-time funding request. The Nolda House is celebrating 100 years anniversary there. It's a very special part of this community, and really, I think it's very appropriate coming out of the office of tax, because it is a huge generator of tourism traffic here in the community. So I think that's a good one-time use of funds.
One more.
Ms. Adams, go ahead.
I skipped this one. Thank you, Mayor. The National Black Repertory Company and the Theater Festival, I saw $85,000 on the first page, the third item, $85,000 out of the general fund, and then they're down here in the occupancy tax, but they didn't get anything, right? I mean, so while they're in both places, and then it says over here, general fund has the same information. Kind of explain that to me, please.
Yeah, it's budgeted. We are proposing to budget it as previous years in the general fund. The Community Agency Allocation Committee requested that they be funded out of occupancy tax. And so just to be transparent, in the Allocation Committee's recommendation, we added it, all of their recommendations, but in that last column, you'll notice it's actually budgeted in the general fund.
As it historically has been.
Yes.
Same amount.
Same amount.
Yeah.
This is just to show you what their recommendation was.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions in this area? Dan, you have a puzzling look,
I did have one.
an inquisitive look.
It is. In the housing program funding, the recommendation is for a little over $60,000 AIDS care service. I just got I've been a donor to AIDS care service for a number of years. And just got an email that they were actually going to be shutting the program down over the coming year. I didn't know if that was information that had been known during the review process, or if that would affect the funding amount to them. I mean, there are, even if you, when you have that, you've got costs to rehouse whoever is still being housed, but I believe declining demand for the services as they had traditionally provided was a part of the organizational decision.
That's right. They're redirecting their resources to the programs that actually need it. I think one of their houses they don't need any longer. So they still are making the same requests. It's just they're redirecting the funds.
Okay, so that information was provided during the review process. Okay, thank you.
That's right.
While I'm at this, even though it's not directly related, could we get an update on the Ujima, am I pronouncing that correct? Ujima project, including maybe some photos, and that's totally outside the budget, but that's a big project, and I guess it's been under construction for 3 or 4 months now, maybe 2 or 3 months.
Yes, we closed probably in April, and construction has begun. Not April? March. Okay.
March.
So we closed in March, and at this point, there have not been any city draws of funding, only private fundings, but they have started construction, but we'll get it.
You can just put that in the Finance Committee, just FYI, informational type letter, be fine, in consent, be fine. Thank you. Okay,
All righty.
we will now move to,
Well, one last slide.
oh, okay.
And it is the CDBG funded agencies. This list of agencies is pending federal funding. So you'll see some agencies that we fund different programs for, but under CDBG, this funding is just pending. So we're uncertain at this time we'll receive that funding.
And we'll deal with that when and if things come up.
The next slide just shows you a list of where the community agencies are located. That was a request we received, and so we had all of the agency physical locations mapped out across the wards and in the community, and most of them are in central locations in the city, and then they are essentially evenly dispersed throughout the community. The purple, it's hard to see it, but the purple dots are the arts and culture type organizations. The green dots are community development type of agencies. The red dots are human services related agencies. And the blue dots are the SOAR funded agencies. We received recently a new request, and the request was to revive the Adult Drug Treatment Court. For the reasons they gave in their request was to address the heroin epidemic, that there was a greater number of children losing parents to either death or neglect because of addiction. There's an increased drug and paraphernalia cases in the courtroom. Police officers are acting as EMS to revive overdose victims, and there is a drug court advisory board that's been established to address some of these concerns. The request is for $35,000. Funding will pay 50% of a court coordinator position, as well as some operating costs. They are asking the county to pay the other 50%, so it's pending county's approval of this as well. One option to pay for this request would be through the general fund contingency. This is already built into our proposed budget.
So somebody, I guess this court advisory board,
Yeah.
they're going to put together some policies, some procedures, what it is that we're buying. I mean, and I understand the urgency of this. I'm surprised it didn't come sooner. I also see where they're asking the county to kick in the same amount. But I would hope that within the next few days or something before we vote on this budget, that the council gets some information as to what is their plan of attack, or what is it that the goals, objectives of what they're going to be doing with this assistance.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is this a revival of this court existed previously, right?
As far as I understand, yes, they're trying to revive.
And
the
so
book.
they have policies and procedures in place,
Yes.
so it should be fairly quickly revived.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
members of the council, I actually this request come forward. I had the opportunity to meet with some representatives from the district court judges' offices, some treatment professionals, and some attorneys who were interested in reviving drug court. And if you're not familiar with it, it uses a series of incentives and sanctions to address cocaine abuse, marijuana abuse, and more recently what we've seen in the news, opioid abuse. This court, as Mr. Larson mentioned, was previously in action. I think somewhere around 2009 or 2010, the General Assembly just cut the juvenile drug courts and the adult drug courts. And, I think if we go back and look at the stats, we'll see that there's probably an increase in crime and several other things of that nature. So I feel like, as chairman of public safety, this is something that's a worthwhile request. It's something that's certainly needed. I think we saw some numbers that said that Forsyth County was probably number one in the state of North Carolina for opioid addiction. And I don't want to make this an opioid addiction issue, even though it is relevant, but this is a cocaine and a marijuana program that helps to strengthen families and improve on public safety generally. So we'll be happy to provide you, Councilmember Adams, with any information you may need, but this is a program that's already been in existence, and we're just resurrecting the drug court.
And when will we know what happens if the county, you feel pretty sure that they're going to ante up, or is it just when a lot of the numbers are in the surrounding the county? I mean, this should be a very serious joint project together to show whether they're just as serious about this as we are. We all know it's a problem. And we really haven't seen, except the state has added some more. Will we get anything from the state, you think, or do we need? I mean, they did put some money out there. I mean, right. Would it hurt to apply or inquire?
We can
from our
apply.
Delegation.
I think the funding that is out there is primarily for enforcement and treatment that's, when you're in hospital type treatment, but we can apply for some. My thought on the drug court was it'd be contingent, our funding would be contingent on the matching funding from the county. The project doesn't work without the full budget.
Well, I'd like to touch that very quickly. Phoenix Rising, I think, is a nonprofit that's actually out raising money to contribute to drug court. We love for the county, Councilmember Adams, to come to the table. I've spoken to some representatives that I won't name at the county, and it's something that's being discussed. I think we've got to do it. It's a huge epidemic, and we've got to make it happen. So I can talk about this court forever, but I don't know that there's anything else to talk about. If I feel like if the county doesn't come to the table, if the private community wants to come to the table, we should definitely be there with them.
Public-private partnership.
It is a public-private partnership, and I just want to be clear about where this funding is going. This funding is to fund one position for a drug court coordinator. The judges, the attorneys, the treatment professionals, and everybody who's involved are donating their time to address this epidemic. So it's definitely worthwhile.
From what I know of how the drug court operates and their effectiveness, we're going to pay the $35,000 one way or the other. I'd rather be upfront about it and approach it this way than to deal with the additional law enforcement and health issues that we're going to get from it if we don't. Okay. I'm in favor of it.
I was going to suggest, because the budget's moving right along, we can always fund this from contingency. So I would suggest that you get the request and everything bundled up nicely, and if you get it to us next week or next month, we can deal with it. I would not want to rush it through unless it's properly vetted, and because you can't hire half a person. Somebody said we need for that other side of that partnership, whoever it is, to come through. So
And another option, Mr. Chairman, might be for the council to consider and vote on the request and then hold the funding pending certain situations being in place that you've described. So there's more than one way to do it, but I think we've got to get there.
Okay, but I would want more information than what's on this page.
All right.
Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I would agree. It's harder to raise match if you don't have a match. So if we're trying to pressure the county to show our intent, and whether the money eventually comes from the private sector or from the county, I think a commitment by the city to address this issue would be timely, and then see what happens with that. We can hold the money, as you say.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. And that is it. We just did this slide to make you aware that we have publicized the public hearing. With the help of the marketing department, we sent out 800 one-page budget highlights to various locations in the city. We made sure the proposed budget was in all the libraries and recreation centers. We mailed out 70 postcards to neighborhood associations, and of course the articles on the site and social media. So that will be this Thursday, June the 8th, in the City Council chamber. That's it.
Okay. And then the last slide you've got here is the meetings, and I'll just highlight the next meeting, which is this Thursday at 7 o'clock, is the Finance Committee public comment period. It'll be in the main chambers. Okay, that's it for the presentation in the capital area. I have 3 or 4 questions on the what was sent out to us. And if you look at your iPads here, it was number 3, responses to councilman questions. But I will see if anyone else has any questions first. Mr. Bessie, I'll just go around the table. Do you have anything else you want to?
No questions. I had a couple of things I wanted to indicate. I am intending to bring back for Finance Committee consideration, and of course at your discretion. I'm not on the committee, but a couple of.
No, go ahead. You got the floor.
One relates to the Transaid situation that's been under continued discussion in the WISTA board and the Public Works Committee, and there is a proposal on the table to restructure the Transaid fare situation. Just for your background, Winston-Salem currently has a 50-cent per Transaid ride fee and a $1 per fixed route fee, which is in reverse proportion to what every other peer city in the state does. Greensboro has the next lowest charge for Transaid at $1.50 per ride, which is the same as their fixed route fare. Durham, for example, has also a $1 fixed route fare and a $2 Transaid. Charlotte has $2.20 fixed route, $3.50 Transaid. Raleigh has $1.25 fixed route, $2.50 Transaid. The reason they do that is because of 2 reasons. One, they're allowed by federal law to charge up to twice the fixed route fare for Transaid, and the reason they want to encourage people who can take the fixed route to do that is that the cost per ride of the Transaid service is much higher than the fixed route service. Because if you're not familiar with the difference, Transaid is effectively a personalized van pool situation. It's by appointment, it's door-to-door service, it's premium quality service. And the fixed route is, of course, regular routes with designated stops. And as a result, what you've got in Winston-Salem is fairly typical. The average cost of a fixed route ride is $3.88. The average cost of a Transaid ride is $15.88. So you don't want to send a price signal encouraging discretionary riders there to take Transaid when they could take fixed route. Of course, Transaid is intended to be, a fallback service for folks who really can't take the fixed route. And what you've seen as a result over the past few fiscal years, from fiscal year 12-13 to fiscal year 16-17, while the fixed route costs were increasing by just under 20% total over that time, not counting fuel. The TransAid costs were increasing more than 46% over that time.
Can I ask,
Yes.
what is the assumption in this budget right now on TransAid?
There's no fare increase in this budget.
Okay, so if we want to do anything, you're going to have to bring me something.
Yes, and the Worcester Board has recommended an increase in restructuring of the TransAid to flat with the fixed route, so it's the same charge. And that I was just going into the overview background of why that recommendation is being made. However, the point that's being made by some advocates for TransAid riders and by some TransAid riders is that there are a number of the riders for whom even the 50 cents is a hardship. And so I am working to develop a proposal that I want the council to consider simultaneously with the question of the TransAid fare restructuring that would take the additional net revenue that would be produced by that and put it back into bus passes that could be used by the folks that needed that assistance on either the fixed route or the TransAid service. So that it would that would also eliminate the incentive to take TransAid instead of the fixed route, but provide some assistance for folks for whom the dollar is a genuine hardship. Sort of that subpart of the population of TransAid users. Working on some alternatives for distribution of those most efficiently, but since that would be a finance committee budget impacting decision, then I would want to bring that for the finance committee's review. So that's one thing.
Okay, got that written down.
The other thing that I'd like to bring back is the possibility of adding a couple of full-time equivalent positions to either inspections or sanitation. I think probably sanitation would be better. That would be dedicated to collecting litter from the rights of way, including the litter on a stick, those little portable signs that spring up like mushrooms every Friday night at intersections all around the city. They're against code. There, for a period of time, there were crews going out to do that. That has not been going on lately, and as a result, that's been piling up. We've had a lot of demand for housing code enforcement, particularly over the past few months, due in part to Councilmember Montgomery's initiative to catch up the backlog there. And so in order to address that community appearance roadside litter problem, I'd like the Finance Committee to consider a modification of the budget to add a couple of positions there. But I'll be bringing that back for you when it's ready, which would be Monday.
Mr. Garrity, we had, I would call them litter crews. Do we still have them? I thought they were part of our job training.
We do have, Councilmember Clark, we do have a rapid response team within our vegetation management division that does litter collection. I think there are two of those rapid response teams, as well as some regular litter collection. I believe most of what Councilmember Bessie's talking about here is the dedication to picking up the signs in the right-of-way. What we don't have enough staff to do that on a regular, proactive basis. We've done it in the past on a reactive basis when there's a complaint. Typically what we'll do is, the enforcement's been in inspections and in community development, but typically what we'll do is we'll send out an inspector or two on the weekend, pay them overtime to pick up signs. But his request is that we would have a crew that we could have their schedule, one or two people whose schedule was Wednesday or Thursday through Sunday, and they every week pull those signs out of the right-of-way.
Okay, all right.
What I noticed is over the past year or so, when I've made sort of those routine requests for targeted enforcement, and unlike for the previous couple of years before that, essentially a month later, the signs are still up. And it's because there's nobody available to send, basically, under the current system.
Okay. Mr. Larson, I'm just going around the table. You got anything you want to bring?
I only had one area that I'm particularly interested in, and that is the question of vacancies within the police department, and you addressed that in one of the questions. We have anywhere from 30 to 60 vacancies in positions systematically, consistently, and I've asked, and I think we should continue to look at the possibility of reallocating, not eliminating the slots, hold the positions open as vacant slots, but look at the funding that we're holding in those positions and see if that money could be reallocated within the police department for recruitment. If we could get enough people that we actually had to fill the slots, then that would be a different problem, but we don't seem to be able to recruit. And take some money for recruitment, and that would include veteran bonuses, perhaps a bonus also for the police officers that choose to live within the city limits, and reward them accordingly. And so I think there's a resource there. The other thing that I don't know, and a question for you, is whether or not we have tapped out the vehicle privilege license, whatever fee. Have we beat on that enough since gas prices are down? Can we hit, is there more revenue to be generated in that area for transportation needs, whether they be roads or whether they be our transit authority?
Yep. We do have the authority to raise the motor vehicle license fee. There are two different ways to go about it. If we do go with our local act, we have $5 available to us. It has to be split 3 ways between different pieces of transportation, but we do have that potential if council wanted to do that.
How much money would that generate? We have any idea?
It's on page 10. We address this question of your package. It would, an additional $5 per vehicle would generate approximately $878,000.
Which would be divided 3 ways.
Right.
So there's probably 150,000 vehicles at $5 each would be $750. You said what, 8?
878.
So there must be 155,000
vehicles.
Which is about right, because there's 240, 242. Have 3 cars.
Well, who's counting?
Who has all the cars?
There's some people up here who have more than that.
Okay.
All right.
Well, as we try to tighten up and squeeze the budget, I think that would be an area that we could keep on the board.
Ms. Adams, did you have anything? No. Mr. McIntosh?
I want to pick up on Mr. Larson's question about the gap between what we will actually pay in salaries versus what we're budgeting for salaries. We know we're not going to be 100% staffed, but I'm going to differ in approach from Mr. Larson's. I'd like to see that money out of the budget. Then I got a question about occupancy tax. We've got a fund balance appropriation one time for $120,000. I know $30,000 of that's for a one-time deal for the National Black Theater. Do we typically have to allocate from general fund for that? We do. I mean, that's a year on year. Is 120 high or low, about in the middle?
Councilman McIntosh, that 120 is, it probably would fluctuate year to year, so there's a number of one-time items in the budget for this year, the Renolda House contribution, Teen-tastic, associated with the National Black Theater Festival. So really try to link one-time or very, periodic uses of the funds, the fund balance, and then most of it is for recurring items like the transfer to the convention center.
Right. I think it's money well spent. I think we get that money back hand over fist. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it, but I'm just wondering if that's a normal number that we're looking at, or something, or an aberration.
It'll fluctuate. The use of fund balance would fluctuate.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything else?
I just want to kind of second Councilmember Bessie's point about we created somewhat of a disincentive or a unintended consequence by our very low transaid rates compared to the fixed route rates, and we've got to really try to get individuals using our fixed route because we made the route changes trying to make that. So I think he's right on track with that, and particularly when you look at how we compare with other cities, we are woefully low in our rates.
Mr. Taylor, do you have anything you wanted to comment on? request for information, whatever.
I could comment on everything in the whole entire budget, but I'll just say I respect Councilmember Bessie's points about TransAid and the mayor's comments. They're well received, and I do think they're well placed. However, I've said this a million times, and everybody knows what I'm going to say. I just will not support any changes to fixed route or TransAid at this particular time. Just hearing the large groundswell of dissupport for that particular program at this time from those who have called me, who have seen me in the stores and the restaurants out in the community, it doesn't sound like people who I represent want this. And it's not something that I can support at this time, especially given the changes we just made. I'm very happy to see the manager's proposal and the support from the council for the SOAR program. We all know how important that is to public safety in the city of Winston-Salem. And I'm glad to hear the new and recent support for the drug court program. That is something that's well needed. I'm also in support, as I said before, for the military incentive. It's good to see that staff sort of included the information in the packet, gave us 3 different options, and I'd like for the council to explore one of those options before it comes to the vote on, is it next Monday? The 19th.
Which is a week from yesterday.
Those are my comments.
Okay. Before I get to mine, let me just summarize. Lee, I think we need to have some piece of paper that says this is either what the Public Works Committee Chairman is recommending or what Wisdom recommended or something, so we have something to look at there. As far as the trash pickup, I know we have added some crews that were not historically there. I'd like some information there on what we've done in the last few years. I think we have significantly increased the number of folks that are picking up trash. I would echo what Mr. McIntosh just said about the vacancies in the police department. I think realistically we know how many officers are in the training class right now, and I think we need to just you can either eliminate those positions or increase. There is a place in the budgets in the back of it where we put in a plug number for the number of open positions, so you can plug it wherever you want. But I think given the significant increase we're looking at, we need to look at that. And the last one on the vehicle fees, we need to spend more money on road maintenance. I've just got potholes everywhere. I challenge anybody to look at the bridge over the railroad track on First Street, and I don't know if that's you, Mr. McIntosh, or who that is. It looks like it was had a mortar attack on it. Now, they just filled it. It's got more patches than it does road. And I also challenge the intersection of Westview and Reynolds Drive.
I've got my own list.
But anyway, everybody got their own list. My concern with the vehicle fee, and we could change it because we said it, but I want to spend more money on road maintenance. But if we put in $5, we got to spend a third more here, a third more there. I would only be in favor of that if we could spend it on road maintenance, because that's where we are, in my opinion, woefully behind. As far as my specific comments, and I don't have the page of what page this was on, but somewhere in there I saw that we're going to spend, I think it was $150,000 on co-promotion for the fairgrounds and the Coliseum. Is that by contract as part of the sale agreement of the Coliseum?
The 75 for Coliseum is by contract as part of the sale. The 75,000 for the fairgrounds, it used to be $150,000 when we owned the Coliseum.
Yeah.
And so it was split as part of the sale. So we still, use the funds in the fairgrounds to basically co-promote, concerts and other events. We've used those funds over the last several years.
Okay, but we've historically spent $150, and we're still spending $150.
Well, we've budgeted for it. We haven't necessarily spent all of that in a given year. It just depends on how well certain concerts.
Okay, well, let me reword the question again. Are we required, because of the sale of the contract, to spend that money on promotion?
No.
It's
up to 75 for the Coliseum, and it's event by event.
We budget for it to be available, but honestly, we have not spent it for Coliseum up to this point.
Because on page 52 is my favorite fund balance page in here. The fairgrounds, bear with me, I got to go down the list. I don't see it on here. But I thought they had $2 or $3 million in their fund balance.
The Public Assembly Facilities Management fund.
Oh, okay, there it is, yeah.
That encompasses a number of the facilities, but most of that money is the fairgrounds.
Fairgrounds, yeah. So, I'm just wondering why we got a budget when we got $2 million in the bank, but anyway.
Rainy day fund.
Yeah.
Is that agreement in perpetuity with the Coliseum?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a sunset on it.
All right. Number 2, somewhere in here was the Walk of Fame, and we had $10,000 allocated. Refresh my memory. I know what it is, but do we have a special committee that's looking into that, and who we're going to put stars down for and all that? Can you refresh my memory?
We do have a committee.
Okay.
That's going to recommend to the council for the stars. It'll be around the convention center, but
Yeah.
the first batch, I think, is working its way towards the council right now.
Okay. Have we given them any direction on how many, a max per year or something, or?
There is a maximum, I think it's 5.
Per year.
There is a class of 2016 that we need to bring forward to, I believe it's it might be the General Government Committee.
Okay.
I think we've received 1 nomination for the class of 2017. So as part of the process that was established, we need to bring those nominations to the council for approval.
Yeah.
But the plan since the inception is to wait to install the stars, to hold the ceremonies until after the renovations.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, it's a mess there right now.
Because the stars will be installed starting along the sidewalk on the 5th Street side.
And these are people in the arts and entertainment industries.
But folks who have passed. but who-
And local, yeah, okay.
Not council people.
Yeah, okay, I understand.
Yep.
I wasn't looking for one.
Unless you can dance.
Unless I could dance. Just a question, you have in here at several places a number of positions per 1,000, and you had it broken out by public safety and other. Did you include FTEs for contract people in that number?
We did not. I think it's
Okay.
full.
My comment there is I would be careful comparing apples and oranges there because, for example, we have outsourced the lifeguards this year, so that's what, 15 or 12, I don't know how many lifeguards we got, 20, let's say, that would have been city employees last year that are not this year, but they're still sitting in the chairs watching people swim. So, and I will say it is very difficult to capture contract FTEs, and do you include construction one-time stuff or how you do it? And I know, for example, the guard downstairs for this building is a contract employee, and I think the cleaning crews contract, are they employees?
They're
Employees. But we have a combination, and it varies by city. So I would just suggest we be careful there. Okay, my big one is page 49, and I can't get my thing. I've let Mr. Bessie off easy on the buses, so y'all go to page 49. First off, there's, on page 48 and 49 are the bus routes and the cost per ridership. I noticed, and I stand corrected on this, that a number of routes, matter of fact, probably half of them already have night, Saturday, and some service, Sunday service. So what we're proposing as a budget is additional routes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Could we update this and maybe put it in red or something, the ones that you're proposing? I'm assuming, and I'm just looking at the, starting on page 48, the third one down, the third most popular, well, it's not the most popular route, but it's one of the most popular. It's got 39,000 riders, does not have night, Saturday, or Sunday, so I would just guess that might be one that's on it. But it would be nice to know which routes that you are proposing them for, because I was under the impression we had done away with all, but it looks like to me that we've got at least, if you weighted the routes by the number of participants, the majority of the ridership does have access to nights and Saturdays, and a lot of them even to Sundays. So that information would be nice. My big issue, and I point this out, is the last item on page 49. The average cost to transport somebody on Route 100 is $71.12. You could buy the person a car and pay the insurance cheaper than $71 a day. Matter of fact, you can rent a car long-term for a small car, $30, $40 a day. That is why I get on my soapbox again and again and harp on the fact that, and I'll use the other example, is we had a downtown circular route that literally nobody rode on. It was probably a higher number than that. And it took us years to do away with it. I am suggesting to this council that we listen to the riders and react accordingly. There's 4 routes on here that need serious attention. I'm picking all the 4 that are above the $20 mark. But if it costs us $26, $27, $29, and $71 per rider, there's something wrong with those routes. And we either need to combine them with something else or do something. And 2 of them get night and Saturday. I can't imagine what it costs to run Route 100 on nights and Saturdays when it's empty. I look for the direction of the Public Works Committee, but I don't think the chairman has an incentive to do it. If not, I will push it through finance. But I think we need to take a fundamental look at these routes that, when I say nobody, for Route 100, that's probably true. I expect the average bus has 0 riders if you took the number of buses divided by the number of people that ride per day. The others, by the way, I would like to know how many buses are assigned to each one of those last 4 routes. That would be, because I'm gathering there's 2 or 3 buses per route. I would think something like that. You can get that later. But there's got to be a better way of servicing these folks. TransAid can do it cheaper than this. TransAid was, what was it, Dan, $19?
15.
About 16.
16, whatever.
15, 16.
Either we outsource it and have somebody with minivans drive it, or because I do know we outsource some of the, it's not the TransAid, but there's certain, we've had people at committees that ran seniors and things like that. Maybe we could contract it out, or you can combine some routes. And by the way, I tried to look at the map that's in here that show it, but the maps, it's so big I can only get a little piece on this screen, even though this is a big screen. But I just think we need to take a fundamental look. I have a very simple philosophy on the bus system, and that is the purpose of the bus system is to transport people, period. That's my very simple philosophy. And if we're not doing that, and I don't think that is the philosophy we have now based on those last 4 numbers on this page, that if we have routes that are virtually unused, that we need to take a fundamental look and not run a bus that gets 6 miles to the gallon up and down these roads. There's got to be a better way of working some of these routes. And I will tell you, I sacrificed on the altar of the bus system the routes in the West Ward. We had one went right out Country Club, and it's gone because I said it's not enough people riding it. Used to have one that went to Sherwood Plaza. It took 1 person out there. We got to put our personal egos aside and say, put the buses where the people want them, not where we want them. Anyway, that's my sermon on the $71 per ridership. That's all I have. Everyone is, Mr. Bessie, would you like to read?
Of course he would.
You going to tell me how that's a good deal?
No, I'm just going to point out that what you're seeing here in substantial part is the reflection of a system that was overhauled in its design. And you've got one of the routes that clearly is not responding to an existing need. That's the 100. And you've got 3 or perhaps a handful more than 3 that as are currently designed are not serving a full capacity. But none of those configurations existed in present form before January. And anytime you do a system reconfiguration, you're going to have some misses.
Well, I think we need to address them quickly.
And I think that's a reasonable point that we should, in fact, ask WISTA to revisit those new routes that do not appear to be working.
Because somewhere in here, just bear with me one more and I'll get to you, Mr. McIntosh, is the thing of we gave 2 cents back in 07 and another penny in 12 or something. It's, I don't know if anybody can find that page real quick. Here, where it went up.
A couple of years ago.
We've gone up 3 or 4 cents in the last 5 or 6 years on it. And now we're getting ready to go up another penny and a half. The last point I'll make on this, and I'll hush. I also would like to ask the fundamental question is why do we run the bus system as an enterprise system and have separate general fund for it and everything else? I can understand doing it with water and sewer, even with public facilities. But the bus system is just another service we offer, and why does it have to have its own separate little fund? Why don't we just treat it like sanitation or whatever?
I can answer that.
Go ahead, you may.
In substantial part because of North Carolina's quirk of labor law. governmental agencies and local governments are barred by state law from negotiating labor contracts. Federal law, on the other hand, requires that to receive federal transportation funding, you have to be willing to negotiate with the labor union for, say, the driver contracts. And so in order to maintain the fiction, and systems around the state have to do this, in order to maintain the fiction that we are not a government agency negotiating with a labor union under that anti-labor quirk of North Carolina law, we have to contract with a private company, which in turn negotiates a contract with the union drivers. So that every time we get on a WISTA bus, we are being driven safely by a union member. But
I understand that, but I just don't understand why it has to be a separate.
I don't think it has to be. I mean, it could be in the general fund if we wanted.
I know they're a separate entity, separate corporation.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd just be curious. Maybe there's a history to it somewhere. Anyway, that's all. Mr. McIntosh.
I just want to go back and talk about talked about this the other day. The way to flip that dollar per rider is to increase the ridership, and it is for us to incent transit-oriented development and to build buses, to build housing where the fixed bus routes are going. We spend the same amount on that bus no matter how many people are on it. So if we can locate housing along that and encourage people to ride it, then that flips. Grab people around it, and we help pay for it. I mean, that's the argument with light rail, and I think there's an avenue here. That's a longer term.
Mr. Larson.
I don't want to entirely speak for Councilmember Montgomery, but because Route 100 does go through the South Ward, I might comment that the South Ward has lost some routes in this process. I think, Route 23, 28? We've had some adjustments. This is a new route, as Councilmember Bessie said. It's sort of unproven and it's new. I think what Councilmember Montgomery was suggesting was to give it a little more time and see if it roots in. I am not opposed to looking at scrapping it, but if we do that, I would suggest we look at some of the old routes that have been taken out of the South Ward and see if they are relevant now in view of taking Lot 100 out.
And you might be able to do it so that a different route comes through.
Precisely. I think we just need to take a look at the bigger picture.
An outlier from our process change. That's all. That's what that is.
Okay. I think I have relayed to the staff the questions that we had. We will meet at 7 o'clock Thursday. It will be a listening session for us as folks, anyone who wants to speak can. They'll have 3 minutes. There'll be a sign-up sheet. So anybody that would like to come, please come. Ms. Saunders, you gave me some good news just before we walked in. Do you want to tell everybody what you told me? I'll give you your 2 minutes of fame.
We found a well.
He apologized for not letting me speak last night. And I
Yes.
told him I didn't need to speak, although we did have good news. Were affirmed by Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch of our AAA rating yesterday. So that's good news.
The hard work of the entire Finance Committee behind that. All right. Yes, ma'am.
I meant to acknowledge the work of the Community Allocation Committee.
Yes.
And if any members were here to just recognize.
Could they stand up if any members are here?
Yeah, Josh.
Thank you.
Let me say this. I think this is the second or third year. Third, maybe.
Third, maybe.
I do truly appreciate your input.
Fine.
And
I don't know how you did it without it.
Ms. Adams actually asked a good question, is why the budget's different. But it's just a few places. Probably 4 or 5, and we'll get some answers back on that. But we've got a $480 million, or where we're spending budget, and that's less than 1% of it. So, but it's a very visible 1%, and so we do appreciate the work that committee has done. I appreciate you recognizing them. All right, no further questions. We are adjourned.
You can.
Force us in no more.